Behind me here we have Chief Deputy Joe Crawford. He's with the Sheriff's Department as well. Have Detective Eddie Wiseman from our Detective Bureau and Criminal Investigative Section. This is the Chief of Detectives, Sean Snuffer, Lieutenant Sean Snuffer, and Deborah Rusnick. She's with the Kanawha County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. The reason why we've asked everybody to come in here today is we want to go over some details about the incident that happened yesterday on Snowbird Drive where there was a shooting. We're going to go over some of those talking points from that incident, and I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about some critical things to talk about. The way that we disseminate information in a case like this is we do understand that there is a need for the public and for you all to get information out. We're trying to do that as quickly as possible. If you could, please understand that we are literally not even 24 hours into this investigation. So there is a lot of information that either we just don't have yet or that we are not able to confirm at this point. There are things that we just can't answer. It's just not appropriate at this point in the investigation, and because the case goes there, I would ask that you all hold questions. How we're going to do this, I'll kind of run you through the events from yesterday as to what you probably already know that we've released. And then I want to take you through what's happened over the overnight hours and into today. So that way you kind of have an idea how this is advanced and where we're at right now, almost 24 hours into the case. But again, just to keep in mind that, just because I may not be able to answer everything that you have questions to at this point in the investigation, but we will be able to get to that later. So for those of you who are just learning about this, there was a shooting yesterday on Snowbird Drive, and that is in the Malden area. It's around the Georges Creek area. It's in Kanawha County. So this was yesterday, Tuesday, October the 22nd. This all started to happen around 6:43 p.m. The Charleston Police Department and the Sheriff's Department went to a residence on Snowbird Drive, and this was in regards to a wanted person. So initially, the information that we had gathered as things were kind of transpiring and you all were beginning to report on this was just that we learned that officers had went there for this wanted person. The man had ran into the woods. When they found him, they had tried to call him out and get him to surrender himself, and it escalated to a point that shots were fired. So from that point, investigators came out, and we pretty much secured the crime scene. Once the crime scene was secured, that's our criminal investigative section that I've introduced you to here behind me. So they spent a great deal of yesterday evening and last night, worked up into the late night hours until it just became a point that we needed to wait for daylight. But while they were there, what they did recover yesterday that we actually reported late last night as one of our final reports, that they were able to recover some evidence at the scene during those evening and nighttime hours. The detectives did confirm early on that there was some felony warrants while the officers were there, and that those were issued by a circuit court judge here in Kanawha County. They also learned that there was evidence, some video evidence, and those were made immediately available to us. Later in the night, they were able to continue their investigation and review some of the evidence that they recovered early on. That evidence told us that it confirmed that the man that they went after did in fact run into the woods when the officers arrived, and the officers gave chase. When they chased the man into the woods, they found him hiding in the woods, and they quickly identified what appeared to be a firearm. The man was holding the firearm pointed at his head, or what appeared to be the firearm pointed to his head, and then he was refusing to drop it on the officers' commands. They gave him numerous commands to do this, and then the man made an aggressive or assertive movement that caused the officers to react because they felt their lives were in danger. When they did that, Charleston police officer discharged his firearm at the subject, and it fatally injured him. During all of this, nobody in the community was injured. No officers were injured, and nobody was harmed other than the suspect. There was no continued threat now. There was no continued threat last night to the community of the people of that area, even though I'm sure they've seen a large police presence there over the last 24 hours, and that just has to do with the investigation. So getting into today, what went on, like I said, we did run into issues overnight with preserving evidence because of the darkness and to complete a thorough investigation. We preserved that crime scene by placing officers at the scene overnight to preserve it and secure it and to keep anybody from going into that scene until our investigators could return back this morning. Once they returned back this morning, they conducted a daylight investigation. They were there the majority of the morning and early afternoon today. And then they were able to collect additional evidence once they got to daylight. We did also we can talk a little bit more about the initial response and what led. I know there's been some questions as to, Charleston Police's involvement with this and how they became involved with the Sheriff's Department. So this was originally from a Charleston Street Crimes Unit. They had identified this subject as somebody with warrants, which is not uncommon for, us to identify somebody with warrants that may be outside of the city or within the county somewhere. Maybe it's inside the city limits and the county goes there. Maybe it's outside, the city goes. Not an uncommon thing, but they did identify this, and they had an idea of where this individual would be at. They actually made confirmation to believe that he was there and contacted deputies. When they contacted deputies, the deputies went with them as a courtesy to have, deputies on scene with the Charleston officers as they went to execute this warrant and to help. So talking about the warrant, we were able to confirm that it was an active Kanawha County Circuit Court capias. The underlying charges for that capias is that this individual is accused of being a prohibited person in possession of a concealed firearm. He's also accused of fleeing on foot in the underlying charges. He was a prohibited person once again in possession of a firearm. And he had a child neglect case creating risk of substantial injury and or bodily injury. So that was the initial warrant that they were there to serve when he fled into the woods. We are also able to identify who the suspect was now, and that is a Phillip, Phillip, Scott, Scott, Dooley. That's Duelley, and he was 41 years old. As of right now, that's kind of where we stand with the case and what has been going on. Like I said, just so you understand, there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to an incident like this. We do like to take our time, and we want to utilize everything that we can, every investigative tool that we can. There are a lot of interviews that are still taking place. This is by no means anywhere close to the end. I know it's a lot of information. We've kind of put out a lot of information right out of the gate, and this is just initial stuff that we know and that we are able to determine as to what took place. But as you know, like I said, we are not anywhere near the end of this investigation. We do have, I'm going to let the Chief Deputy Joe Crawford come and answer any questions that you guys may have. Just so you know, the prosecutor's office, Deb Rusnick, is here. Any kind of critical case that we would have, the prosecutor's office is always made aware of what's going on, and she can probably, if you have any questions as to the process. At this point, like I said, that's kind of where they're at with the prosecutor's office, is that we build a case and investigate a case, and then it gets presented to them. So she can kind of tell you what happens at that point and how that procedure goes. But that's kind of the talking points for that. Chief Crawford?
You have any questions for Sergeant Lester? Did a very good job laying out the timeline and what took place yesterday and into the day. Like I said, it's early still in the investigation, so we're still putting some interviews together, looking at some other evidence. The autopsy was performed this morning. There'll be obviously information that we need from the autopsy to have a better picture of that side of it. Our detectives were there this morning, and then, like I said, we were back at the scene this morning, recovering additional evidence at the scene there at Snowbird Lane.
Did he die at the scene?
Yes, he was pronounced deceased at the scene.
How many shots were fired?
We're still in the process of making sure we have that accurate number. We can say there was more than one or two shots. So.
Was it officer? From which agencies were officers firing?
The shots were fired by a Charleston Police Department officer that was with their specialized unit, street crimes unit.
So it was only one officer?
Yeah, at this point, we've only determined there was one shooter from law enforcement that engaged the suspect.
Sorry, Mr. might have said this, but I heard the phrase "appeared to be a firearm in his hand." Have you all confirmed that it was a firearm that the deceased had?
It is still under investigation, so we're not inclined to
To
make
release
any
that.
specifics at this point.
Is the officer on leave?
Yeah, Charleston Police Department has protocols and policies in place, just like we have. Anytime you have a critical incident and your members are involved, there's a process that goes that takes place to make sure that they are taken care of, and there's certain things that have to take place before they can be returned to duty. I would defer to Charleston Police Department that, that's something they would be better equipped and answer that question, because it's their officer and it's their policy and procedures of how they handle it. A lot of similarities across the nation, but that would be a question for Charleston.
In terms of the timeline of it all, how would you say from the moment that first responders got to the scene to the moment that the shot was fired, how long period was that?
I'd say no more than 10, 15 minutes, probably.
It's pretty quick.
Yes.
What evidence have you guys recovered today?
We cannot.
We're not going to get into like I said, it's still being put together. Like I said, there's some information that we don't have that will be waiting to come in from especially the medical examiner's office. So we're not going to comment any further on what evidence that was recovered there at the scene.
And I'm trying to remember from when this happened last year. No matter what the sheriff's office finds in their investigation, it is going to be presented to the prosecuting attorney.
Basically, and that's a good question. The question is, right now you have 2 investigations taking place. We are conducting the criminal investigation side to make sure that it was lawful and to that point. And then Charleston Police Department is doing an internal review and an internal investigation as far as their professional standards unit to make sure policies and procedures were taking place. So you have 2 parallel investigations ongoing at the same time. But we will, once we get our case pretty much tied up, then we'll present it to the prosecutor's office, and then they'll make a determination based on the facts and the evidence of the case of how that proceeds from there.
Could you repeat the investigation the sheriff's office is conducting?
Kanawha County Sheriff's Department is conducting the criminal investigation side of it.
What was it?
Obviously, it was a high stressful situation. Ultimately, these officers, make the decision, to fire a shot. Like you said, they felt like their life was in danger. Be able to, just talk about what officers go through day to day.
If you've ever been involved in a critical incident like that, I have. Unfortunately, I've been there. You go through a whole gamut of emotions. Your adrenaline's pumping. You're really focused. You're paying attention to detail. Trying to do your job. Training has a big part of that. Training kicks in because if you train that way, that's how you'll react under pressure and circumstances like that. So then you have an adrenaline rush and high, and then you have that dump at the end of it when you feel like, okay, everything's calmed down, or the threat or the situation you're in has de-escalated to a point where you can let your guard down a little bit. So there's a mix of emotions. And then obviously moving forward, there's a lot of things that take place. Each person is different. Each individual is different of how they handle and deal with the stress and the traumatic event that they underwent and went through, such as an officer-involved shooting. So it is very stressful. Our men and women go out every day, and this is always a possibility. This seems to me that it's becoming more prevalent in our society. You go back 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, you didn't have very many critical incidents where you had officer-involved shootings. Recently, here probably within the last year, we've had several throughout the county. So it seems like it's become more prevalent.
And what do you want to say to the people that feel kind of unsafe right now and that are, what do you want to say how safety is in our office lands?
Pardon?
How would you want to say to the community that feels kind of unsafe right now, or that there's been so many that...
The community should feel safe. There's no immediate threat or any threat to the community. It was an isolated event. Basically, our law enforcement is there to do their job, to apprehend the individual and take him into custody and present him to the court because that's what they were supposed to do. Obviously, you know, you had the incident where it didn't go as normal or what people would consider normal. Now we're dealing with a critical incident where you have officers, family, you know, the family of the individual's life that was taken. You know, we take that into consideration as well. And as officers, you know, they're human. So they have to experience that side of it as well. And, you know, we sympathize with the family members that are dealing with the loss and tragedy of their loved one as well. So it kind of goes back to the question about the emotions that you go through. You've got a lot of things that are, you know, taking place.
You mentioned that both investigations would be submitted when they're done. They'll go to the prosecuting attorney's office, and you said like what decision would be made. What kind of decision would that be in terms of like criminal?
They'll review the evidence and they'll make a determination whether there was any laws violated or whatever. Now the other investigation is internal. Charleston will determine if there were policies and procedures violated or if they need to change a policy or training. You know, obviously when you have critical incidents like this, one of the things you do, you look back and you review what went right, what went wrong, what could we do better to make it safer and make it better. So that side of it is what will take place through Charleston. But the criminal side, obviously, we want the facts, we want the evidence as we have it, we present it, and then they make a determination as to what avenue to approach there.
Generally, the process is once a critical incident occurs like this, my office is contacted by the investigating agency. We either go to the scene or advise via telephone or something of that. We conduct our own thorough review of evidence and make a decision as to whether or not there is criminal conduct.
On the part of
And that is only on the criminal investigation aspect. We have nothing to do with the internal aspect.
And I think Prosecutor Resnick also brings up a good point. I mean, the critical incidents, they're notified on every critical incident, such as officer-involved shootings or a major homicide scene or a major case. It may not have anything to do with death, but these are the things that we do. We collaborate. We give them the information because they're ultimately the ones that has to review everything and make that determination. We want to make sure they have everything that they need. Everything that we have, they have.
Would you be able to repeat the list of charges underlying for that individual? Like you mentioned the prohibited person to firearm.
Yeah, one is a prohibited person in possession of a firearm. The other one was a drug.
Something else I think, Laura, getting that information for you that is, I wanted to touch on, but I didn't in the initial one. I'm sure the chief here would completely agree. This is also an incident. We're talking about critical incidents, and you're talking about how officers respond. You're talking about two different agencies that do not normally get to work hand in hand. And the professionalism that was shown yesterday, the restraint, the decision-making between both agencies and their ability to work together, even though this had a very unfortunate result, there was a lot for this to be a very heated and escalated. They were able to not only deal with an escalated situation, but to completely turn that around and de-escalate it and try everything they could to resolve this without this final outcome. And I think we should definitely commend, and I'm sure the chief would agree, that all the officers involved yesterday, you know, they did an excellent job of, you know, putting their training together and working together with two agencies that do not normally work every day together.
Very well said. Basically, it's prohibited person possession of a concealed firearm, fleeing on foot, prohibited person possession of a firearm, and child neglect creating substantial injury or bodily harm, which were pretty serious felonies. Obviously, that's why Charleston Police Department was there. So they did their due diligence, and I can't say enough. Based on what we see or what we know right now, they did try to de-escalate the situation as best they could.
And those are all considered underlying charges?
Yes, that's, to our understanding, that's what why they went to serve the warrant, or the capias where he didn't appear.
One more time, could you say the name and spell it for me?
Yes, it's Philip, Phillip. Middle name is Scott, Scott. Last name is Dooley, Duelley, 41 years of age.
And do you know where he's from?
There's several, during the investigation so far, we've found several residences that he had been at or frequented, so I can't tell you which one was the right one, but the information was where the Charleston detectives had that information where he was at, and they identified him there that evening as being at that residence on
And then
Snowbird Lane.
all the criminal charges are felonies? All the
I believe so.
charges?
Fleeing on foot is.
Fleeing on foot would be a misdemeanor, but the other ones are felonies.
And you said prohibited person, is it because he wasn't allowed?
He was not allowed to possess a firearm legally. Anything else? Thank you. You know, at some point in time, as things continue and we get to the point, there may be future information that can be released at a later date, but that's pretty much all we're going to have up until this point. Thank you.